So from prawns to fashion, is that an appropriate segue?
Well, I don't know. It's Christmas. I think anything's applicable. It's the silly season. Let's do it.
All right, well, to take us through the hits and misses of the fashion this year, we're joined by fashion writer Patty Huntington. Patty, welcome.
Good morning.
Now, where do we start? Because, I mean, it has been an amazing year for fashion. We were talking earlier about how political it's become, certainly with, the White House, as far as the run for the White House, Hillary and her pants, Melania and...
Her boycott.
Yep, the boycott.
Ivanka and her dress line.
And even in the UK, the new British Prime Minister.
Theresa May in trouble for a pair of 1,700 trousers. Yeah, I mean, well, let's get to fashion and politics.
Yes.
I mean, I've got to say probably the number one story in terms of the way the fashion industry runs is the see now, buy now revolution, which we talked about in September. And that was... the change from showing runway collections to the buyers and the press 6 months ahead of when it's available in store, but the public seeing it, not being able to get their hands on it. And in the last runway season, a number of designers decided to change that by circumventing their own production sort of systems and showing it at the same time that it was available to the public. Now, the jury is still out whether or not that is a great sales boost, which it was for some, like Burberry and Tom Ford and Tommy Hilfiger, or whether it's a gimmick. So, I mean, we're going to see that sort of moving forward. I mean, here we have Burberry. I mean, they say that Burberry said that some of the most expensive things are the things that sold immediately. So Tommy Hilfiger, Tom Ford, Burberry, and other designers are sort of planning that. Also in Australia, people are looking at it, but it's not without some hassle, because you kind of have to change the way you do things and get people to sign non-disclosure agreements. So that was a really big story. I've got to say another story which has obviously impacted the industry is the designer shakeups. Now we talked about this last year.
Yes.
Again, another year, another round of musical chairs. So some big names sort of out suddenly.
Yeah.
Francesca Costa at Calvin Klein, Peter Copping at Oscar de la Renta shortly after they showed it in Australia. And Eddie Slimane at Saint Laurent. And look, one of the biggest, and something with an Australian connection, was Justin O'Shea. Now, you might recall we talked about Justin O'Shea.
He was definitely shaking things up while he was there.
He was shaking things up at the Australian who had no actual sort of design experience and was appointed as the creative director of this 70-year-old Italian suit brand, Brioni. And... he brought in Metallica as the face of the first campaign, and he had chinchilla coats on the runway. Here he is taking his bow in this, wanted to make the first collection about gangsters and vampires, and then he was sacked within 6 months. Some said it was too much of a shake-up, and look, a comment was made about an Instagram post that he made the day before he was fired. Metallica is all about, on the stage they use a lot of coffins and sort of death and disaster imagery. Well, there was an image, he posted a photo on Instagram of a Metallica-inspired coffin in the window of Brioni's flagship in Paris, which some people thought was inappropriate given...
At the time.
This is a city that's still in grieving from a series of terrorist attacks.
Wait, what is a designer meant to do then? Other than,
shake things up.
Well, yeah, but is it all about the bottom line, as in they simply want more sales, or is it to push them out there as a name?
Well, both, really. They want them to push them out there and to make the sales.
But to be controversial.
Well, and he did shake it up. He changed the logo. He had Metallica as the face. A lot of people were applauding that. And I think that there was probably a culture. It was such an old brand, and there was probably quite a conservative culture. He just didn't gel. And look, perhaps, also inexperience. You've got to have kind of corporate experience. He had a lot of experience with an online fashion retailer, but it's not quite the same as stepping into a fashion house where you have a lot of manufacturers and buyers, and maybe I'm not quite sure what happened. But there was commentary about the fact that it was just too much of a radical shake-up of the image. So he's out, and he went on tour with Metallica afterwards.
Maybe he's got a new career with Metallica.
And so posting photos to Instagram, yeah.
Well, let's continue with the theme of shake-ups and also the question of sensitivity. And, of course, we're talking about France again here, and this is around the wearing of the hijab. And in France this year, we also saw a moment where certain beaches were banning the bikini.
The burkini.
Yes,
the burkini, which is an Australian invention, let's not forget. Yes, well, I'm calling it the year of the hijab, even though there's a hijab emoji, which Unicode is authorised for next year. So that's going to be the year of the hijab emoji. It's been a really hot button topic all over Europe. You've got the bans on the full face burqa. Obviously already France. Belgium, Bulgaria, Netherlands in a couple of months ago, and now Germany wants to ban it. But on the beaches, we talked about the ban of many coastal towns of the bikini women getting arrested or fined.
Yeah.
There was an international protest. But by the same token, we've had sort of on the mainstream sort of fashion area. Here is a contestant for Miss Minnesota, USA, the first time wearing a hijab. CoverGirl has had its first sort of hijabi wearing ambassador, and you've had Dolce & Gabbana, an Italian fashion brand, doing a range of hijabs and dresses, and I mean Uniqlo did a line of hijabs. Some people have come out and criticised that, saying it's kind of normalising Islam. But the retailers in the fashion industry, I mean, there's 500 million women, Muslim women, and it's a delicate.
Sort of makes financial sense, really, doesn't it?
They can't ignore it.
Yeah. All right. Let's bring it back home.
Okay.
Bit of a breakout year for Indigenous models, do you think?
It has been. Well, we're talking about sort of the sort of growing diversity in Australian modelling, which has always been a bone of contention. I mean, there's been some fantastic Asian models and high-profile Asian fashion bloggers. This year, I'm really sort of I think that the Indigenous Australian models and some Sudanese Australian models really sort of made their marks. Charlie Fraser was the first Indigenous Australian model to really make it big on the international stage earlier this year. She walked in all the big international shows, from Prada to Chanel to Balenciaga, and she's done a few campaigns. In Australia, we had Magnolia Mamuru, who was the first Indigenous Australian to be part of a Miss World Australia pageant. So I think there's been a lot of criticism about the fact that sort of really black girls don't get the work that their fairer-skinned counterparts do, and I mean that's certainly the case. But I think it's changing because Magnolia scored a Chadstone campaign that's pretty high profile. And Yaya Deng, who was a Sudanese Australian, scored a Westfield campaign, and another Sudanese Australian, Ducky Thought, sort of went to New York Fashion Week and was in Kanye West's show, and so I think things are really starting to shake up there.
All right. Well, we can't also forget that it has been a big year on the US stage for certain women who have political power at their fingertips. We're talking, of course, about Hillary Clinton, who was running for president. There weren't as many comments about Donald Trump, though, on his fashion states.
No.
But Melania Trump
other than
also.
baggy trousers
Yeah.
and long ties.
Let's not forget the red trucker cap, which became iconic and was
Gee,
worn.
that's a fashion statement, isn't it, Patty?
Well, no, that red trucker cap really became a sort of an iconic fashion sort of item. In terms of Hillary, of course, she calls herself a pantsuit aficionado. She's really made that her signature garment. And, I mean, she's rarely seen in public in a dress or a skirt. I mean, it's sort of quite androgynous. And look, her choice of white, she wore a white trouser suit when she accepted her nomination in July. And many noted that that was a nod to the suffragettes who always wore white, and in fact the feminist movement.
And purple in defeat.
In purple in defeat, that's right. And then she wore it again for the third presidential debate. And look, the pantsuit thing. There was a YouTube sort of or a flash mob dance, pantsuit power, done before the election. Women were encouraged to sort of vote, wear white to vote. The fashion industry really backed Hillary Clinton, did a lot of merchandise, but she didn't get in, and they weren't happy with Trump. And as we've talked recently, a number of them were quite vocal in the fact that they did not want to dress Melania.
Yeah, I reckon that's going to change, don't you?
Well, it is already changing. Anna Wintour, the editor of US Vogue, was spotted at Trump Tower this week. Other designers have come out and said I'd be happy to dress her. So, but I mean, many other things as well. We had sort of Black Lives Matter and.
We're sorry, Patty, we're just almost out of time, but I did want you to take a quick nod to those people we've lost this year and the impact that they had on fashion.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we've had every year. There's always. I mean, we had a number of very influential music figures. Obviously, David Bowie, Prince, both of them. I mean, tremendous musicians, but also sort of iconic in the fashion sense. In terms of sort of really legendary designers, we had Sonia Rykiel in France, who was the queen of knitwear in the sort of 60s, from the 60s onwards. André Courrèges, who was one of the big sort of forces in sort of the 60s space age couture. And then, look, very sadly and totally unexpectedly, 39-year-old Australian Richard Nicoll died in October from a heart attack, which stunned the industry. So terribly sad. And it was just on the he'd actually closed his own line because of the difficulties, and he was about to sort of start with Adidas. And look, finally, I mean, someone who was a big force in sort of fashion photography in the 70s, David Hamilton, with his sort of soft focus, many said soft porn look. I mean, very sadly, he committed suicide last month, a matter of weeks after 4 women called him out for, rape allegations when they were sort of his teenage models. And look, I think that could potentially be a can of worms, because no one has yet asked who else knew about these claims. But yeah, so a number of big names.
A little bit of a sombre note there for us, but we will look forward to what 2017 will bring as well, and of course seeing you then when you come back. Thank you very much, Patty.
My pleasure.